Hi, I'm Craig Burton and welcome to the Training Schemes Update. Together with Vaughan Marsh, Rachel Andrews and Amanda Van Santen, we'll be running through the various updates for the schemes that we individually and collectively look after for the RYA. Normally at this point in the conference we would be introducing all the members of the RYA and publications team that are around the conference venue. This year we've got a slightly different approach in that we have a Who's Who section on the conference website, so please do check in there to see what's changed in the last 12 months, as there have been a few changes to members of staff in each of the teams. Now, before I go into the shore-based update, I just want to talk a little bit about first aid certificates, and in particular the extensions that we allowed on RYA first aid certificates. You may recall that early last year there was a lot of concern by many people about the fact that their first aid certificate was expiring and they were unable to revalidate it because the courses had been cancelled due to lockdown and restrictions around the world. In response to that, we released the 1-year extension, which you could get by doing a virtual update with an RYA recognised training centre. Sadly, nearly a year later, people are running out of time on those extended certificates. So we have introduced a new extension for another 12 months, which again can be done through doing an online update with a recognised training centre. Now, the certificate can be used to validate an RYA instructor certificate, or for those that are looking to commercially endorse a RYA certificate, such as Yachtmaster Offshore. It is also worth pointing out that this is the extent to which we can extend these certificates now. So as soon as it is possible to do a full first aid update, we urge you to do that, because we don't have much more room, if any, to do anything about first aid certificates at the moment. Another point to consider is that if your centre is required to comply with health and safety requirements for first aiders on site, an extended certificate won't meet that requirement. So you must ensure you have a fully qualified first aider on site when you're operating. It's also worth considering that potentially we have 2/3 of instructors relying on extended first aid certificates, so it could become increasingly more difficult to find first aiders to work at your centre. So let's now take a look at the shore-based scheme from the perspective of 2020. Now, it's no understatement to say that classroom training was severely impacted, be that for the shore-based scheme or for the dinghy powerboat schools where they use classrooms on a regular basis. Now, one of the things we all got quite used to though during 2020 was this, the Zoom call. And I'm sure we've all spent many hours on these, be it for work or for social interactions. I think we've probably all had a birthday over Zoom in the last 12 months. But this was a piece of technology that made a big difference to classroom-based training, or shore-based training at least. And what we saw globally was a whole load of people, be they young or old, new or experienced instructors, desperately trying to adapt the way they taught and make the most of this new technology, and how to deliver a good lesson as opposed to just a video webinar presentation. So we learned that an overhead view could be quite useful, where showing chart work or documents, or just a different perspective for a visual aid or something that you would normally pass around a classroom. We'll have all sorts of other things that we could use to try to essentially make the most of our virtual equipment and somehow enhance our training. From what we saw from the centres around the world and what we learnt ourselves, we decided that actually we could probably deliver instructor training virtually as well. So from the back end of November last year, we put most of our shore-based instructor training courses virtually and programmed them for a trial run, and they were very successful. So for now and for the foreseeable future, they will be delivered virtually until we're in such a place where we can guarantee that classroom training can take place for these courses. They are programmed up to the end of 2021. But if the classroom scenario becomes genuinely viable, then we may move some back into classroom later this year. But we're not in a rush to do that. It's important that we can guarantee the delivery on the dates that we've published them. Having a year of program cancel, reprogram is not good for anybody's soul. A question that we ask quite frequently is, will we continue using virtual training in the future? And the answer to that is probably. But what we don't know is what the appetite will be from the market. It has many of the drawbacks of the old-fashioned night school courses, whereby it can be drawn out over a period of time, so there's a dropout rate. And also, when people are able to get out and about and go wherever they like, we're not entirely certain how much appetite there will be to tie themselves to a computer. One thing that is certain, it's still going to have a presence. It will have a role to play in training, and what we've got to work out is what that is in whatever the future turns out to look like. If you haven't already seen it, there was a great session about teaching virtually earlier in the conference. A recording of that is available to watch on demand now. In last year's conference, we announced the new material for teaching e-navigation, which were images, which were simplified versions of a typical leisure plotter, using electronic charts and a new raft of questions around looking at the basic principles of using this equipment effectively and safely in the modern world. And we proudly proclaimed that we would be going for phase 2 of this during 2020 and producing more material. We also said that the radar course was going to be rewritten with new material and supporting books developed in the same time. But then, well, it didn't really go to plan, as we all know. But it remains a very high priority of ours, is to ensure that the modern appropriate use of electronic navigational equipment is embedded in all we teach, be that theoretical shore-based courses or practically. It shouldn't have escaped many people's notice that the future of paper charts is constantly under threat, and the US have already moved away from them for the leisure world, and the UKHO were close to removing the leisure folios not so long ago. So it will happen at some point in future. Some of you may have seen the report of a recent review from the Maritime Coast Guard Agency about the way their STCW training for their Merchant Navy officers is conducted, and the overwhelming tone within there is that the use of electronic navigational equipment is the primary proficiency that's needed in the modern world, with some of the more traditional techniques be seen as a backup and not something that is a primary purpose of a navigator in the future. It'll be interesting to see how that actually gets filtered out. It's only a report at present, but there's certainly going to be some impact in the emphasis on what is the priority in training and education. Now, what we're not talking about here is in the shore-based schemes and the navigation courses, we're going to teach a full radar course, nor in a day skipper practical course either. But what we do need to do is actually make sure it is constantly referred to when it is relevant. So when assessing risk of collision, we need to include, and if radar is fitted, that should be used. In fact, when it comes to call regs, the areas where the call regs do refer to radar should be emphasised when it's pertinent and relevant. Not least when we're talking about restricted visibility, where the significance of detecting things by radar affects the way you are supposed to behave under Rule 19 in conducting restricted visibility. The other parts of it is a basic understanding, and we've been seeing this in the Yachtmaster papers for many years, certainly before I was working in the RWA, where there were questions about a position using a range and a bearing from a Raycon, for argument's sake. And we still have those questions in the shore-based exercises. So it's just ensuring that's just put into context of you're using a range and a bearing from a Raycon, but that's come from a radar. And with the new images, we have the ability of showing that in terms of, and this is what that looks like on a radar display. It doesn't need more depth than that, but it's just introducing the concepts to people. And the other element in there is just the simple understanding of relative motion, which is in its simplistic form, all radar sets will use relative motion. And we know that there are more advanced things like true motion, and there's much more intelligent stabilization of leisure sets. But fundamentally, we need to state the basic principles. And whilst we talk about in the exam process of you could use plotting sheets if there isn't a radar, that's not to plot a precise time of closest approach, but it's about assessing the aspect of that vessel, knowing that a vessel tracking down from your starboard bow isn't necessarily somebody driving at you from your starboard bow. It could be somebody that's crossing you, it could be somebody that you're overtaking, but not a detailed plot. It's just understanding the relationship between the relative motion and your vessel. Now, both the navigation instructors, who will have a revalidation hopefully released later this year, and also the Yachtmaster and cruising instructors in their revalidations will have more detail about what we mean and the level we're talking about here of how we keep embedding this in what we do in our normal operation. To help us with this, there's also the Royal Institute of Navigation have released a booklet about various pieces of electronic navigational equipment, and it's more about how it works and its suitability and relevance to the recreational boater, less about how you use it, although it does go into that to some extent. And it's also got a website which highlights some of the issues they consider as these need to be addressed really for this to truly be embraced. And for example, charts that are approved would be a improvement on the current scenario, but also more common functionality so that you've got more understanding of what you're on within one manufacturer to another manufacturer. So that's well worth your look and to keep an eye on the developments of that particular area. That pretty much wraps it up for me, and all I really need to say now is thank you for your attention, and I hope you stay safe and that we will all meet ourselves in the future on a boat, ideally, enjoying what we love to do. And I'll hand over to Vaughan Marsh. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Craig. So I'm Vaughan Marsh, the Chief Instructor for Sailor Motor Cruising, and I'm going to talk about a few bits and pieces, funny enough, to do with the Sailor Motor Cruising scheme. The first thing we've done is we've made some changes to the Yachtmaster Instructor course and the Yachtmaster Instructor and Cruising Instructor revalidations. Some of them are COVID-led and some of them were plans that we had already that in some cases we've just brought slightly forward. So all courses are bookable online. When you book online, you'll be asked to select a theory lesson that you'll need to then prepare and you'll need to then deliver on your course or revalidation. There's also some pre-learning for you to do. It's designed to value add. There is obviously an element of ensuring that you understood it, but it really is about value adding and giving you some ideas of things that you need to think about before you actually turn up and get on the boat, if you are in fact getting on a boat. As part of the revalidation or part of the course also, you'll have access to either a classroom or a marquee or a space outside, which means that you can do some of the things you would normally do down below or inside the vessel that just because of COVID-19 we're a little bit worried about, so we're giving you the opportunity of spreading more than 2 meters apart. We've reduced the attendees from 4 to 3, so 3 students plus a trainer. And also, I'm afraid there's no opportunity at the moment for Yachtmaster Instructor courses or revalidations to be own boat, and that's specifically about lack of administrators to administrate it and lack of trainers to deliver the training. We've also had a little think about expiry dates for revalidations or courses. So as part of the trying to fit courses in over the last year, we found that a lot of people have tried to revalidate on the 6-year point rather than the 5-year points. In other words, they've been out of date for a year already. I've no idea how they were delivering courses. They shouldn't have been, but that's what they've been doing. So to try and encourage people to revalidate early and giving them the option of doing so, up to a year prior to when your Yachtmaster Instructor or Cruising Instructor is due to run out, you can revalidate. When you revalidate, you'll get 5 years from when it was due to run out. Also, if you revalidate late, so in other words, after the 5-year point, whenever you revalidate, you'll also get 5 years from when it was due to run out. Moving from the admin onto the actual revalidation itself, we've reduced the Yachtmaster Instructor course from 5 days to 4 days. The reason for that is there's only 3 students instead of 4. There's also the fact that there's some pre-learning, and so we're filling those gaps with there. And also, it's something we've been considering and talking about as a team for the last 3 or 4 years, to be honest. As the Cruising Instructor courses took place and there was more control of that, we found that cruising instructors that are coming through for Yachtmaster Instructor now are better prepared, can teach, observe and debrief better than they could before. So that helps, and we can shape the Yachtmaster Instructor course to be more about coaching and less about filling in the gaps from the CI course. On the revalidation reassessment, we've also reduced time on the boat, or the time of the revalidation, and that is, I'll be honest, it's completely about COVID-19. It's about, in fact, feeding you. So we can get you to turn up after breakfast, we can give you a packed meal, but sitting down for dinner somehow, I couldn't work out a way of doing it. So the sensible thing is we just stop at 7:30, you go home and you go and eat where you like, and then we don't have that issue of trying to squeeze you all in somewhere. We've also reduced the sail revalidation from being 2 days to being 1 day, and that's purely about you sleeping on board the boat. I don't particularly want it to happen if I can avoid it. So that seemed like a sensible option. You just turn up, do it for the day. There's only 3 of you. You've done some pre-learning already, and it's the best we can do. I suspect that will change once we get to the stage where we can go boating normally again. As part of looking at how we support schools or instructors abroad, or schools or instructors where the instructor that's due to do a revalidation can't get there for whatever reason, we're just in the process of finishing an online revalidation option for people. So it means that you don't need to leave home. You do your revalidation based on the same prepare a theory lesson, the same pre-learning. You just meet a trainer on Zoom rather than on a boat. You do your revalidation and you'll get 2 years from when your 5-year point was. So in other words, when you would have run out, which just will keep you going for a little bit longer. And hopefully by then we'll get to the stage where we can get back to normal boating. You can only do it once, and it is really just a stopgap. So I have no plans for that to continue. Last year I announced that we were going to look at the cruising scheme, all syllabus, all courses, and see how they would all fit together. Now COVID-19 has got in the way of that significantly because there's quite a lot of brain space needed for that. But one of the things we looked at is how many courses we're selling and how many courses we aren't selling. In advanced pilotage, we sold 30 a year for the last 3 years. So you're not using it. So the sensible thing is let's just get rid of that course completely and let's concentrate on the courses that you do want to deliver and make sure we provide the best support we can for those. Lastly for me then is the future. I personally think the future is bright. I know that it's been a harrowing 12 months and there's a little bit more of it to go still. But the quantity of boats that are not for sale, you can't find a yacht or a motor cruiser that's for sale that's of any standard at the moment because they're all sold. People aren't willing to go abroad or wanting to go abroad. So I believe, based on the schools and instructors I've spoken to, that as soon as people are able to go boating, your phone will be ringing off the hook. I wish you every luck with that, and I hope to see you on the water very, very soon. And I'd like to pass you over to Rachel Andrews.
Thanks, Vaughan. Hi, I'm Rachel Andrews. I'm the Chief Instructor for the Power Schemes of Personal Watercraft, Inland Waterways and Powerboating. Well, what a tricky year the last one has been, eh? Really stop-start, and in fact more stop than start. What I'm hoping for in 2021 is that we move further towards more normal boating and we get more start than stop. The Personal Watercraft and Powerboating scheme did particularly well after lockdown last year, where lots of people were able to get out and find accessible training all around the country. One thing that did happen though, with the multitude of people that managed to get out on the water on whatever craft they could lay their hands on, is there was a rise in antisocial behaviour and some safety issues as well. There were a number of high profile serious accidents. I'm really hopeful that we're going to start to see some signage around the country which is really consistent. The RWA has been working with the Personal Watercraft Partnership to come up with easy to spot messaging in a consistent way so that hopefully people feel welcome to harbours and they can understand where they're permitted to go and the speed limits involved. What I'd really like to talk about now though is some things that you can do within your courses to help to promote safer behaviour on powerboats. The first thing I want you to talk about, both on powerboat and personal watercraft, is the absolute critical importance of shoulder checking. It's really easy when we're heading in one direction to just get focused on where we're headed to and to really become a little bit oblivious of what's behind us. So before we're making those maneuvers, change of direction, or potentially big changes in speed, a big look behind on those shoulder checks is absolutely essential. Key on the shoulder check is that we're looking right the way around and that you can see the stern of the vessel. If somebody can't see the outboard or the stern of the vessel, they're not looking far enough. I'd also like you to try to incorporate a discussion on what happens when you go cruising in company. So thinking about it, when people buy a personal watercraft or a powerboat, they tend to find friends that also like to spend time on the water and have their own craft. So we need to give a little bit of guidance about how that can look and the sorts of things that they can do to make sure they have a safe day out. So things like how they're going to position when they're moving along together, making sure that they're not line astern and that they are outside of the wake line of the vessel that they're following. So off to the side or off in a kind of arrow formation is probably the best, and in front of the wake of the boat in front to give consistent steering and also to give a smoother ride for those on board. Something that I'd like you to talk about as well is wake jumping. I know it's not something that we teach, but it's certainly something that we see almost every personal watercraft doing and quite a few powerboats. I would like you to impress upon the students that although they might be going to jump some wake, and that might be the intention for what they're doing when they go out in a group, that they shouldn't be doing it close in behind vessels, especially not those which are highly manoeuvrable. The problem we can face there is that as somebody jumps out from on the wake from behind a vessel, that vessel turns, having not seen them, then we can end up in a disastrous situation. Another thing I'd like you to have a conversation with your students about is how they can introduce any of their friends or family to helming their powerboat. So thinking about the things that are critical that we have to know before we helm a powerboat safely. Things like use of the kill cord, the hands on the wheel and the throttle at the same time, and making sure that they're communicating with anyone that's on board about when they're making a change in direction or a change in speed, that they're doing really great shoulder checks, and that any turns that they take at speed are taken as a nice long arc as opposed to a sharp one. This conversation could have the effect of making their boating much safer and introducing people in a safer way to powerboating. Unfortunately, I can't get to a canal so I can be near to a narrowboat or a river cruiser that we would use within the scheme. However, what I'd like you guys to focus on during the Inland Waterways Helmsman's course is getting the students to locate and test the carbon monoxide alarm on the vessel. Hopefully that will then prompt people when they move forwards either to using their own boat or going on a hire boat to remember that it's an important piece of equipment. During the course, could you also please discuss the signs and symptoms and have a little look around and try to locate anything that could be the cause of a carbon monoxide leak. Thanks for listening to the Power Schemes update. I wish you all the very best for the 2021 season. And if you've got any questions relating to the Power Schemes, please don't hesitate to get in contact. I'm going to hand you over now to Amanda.
Thanks, Rachel. And hi, I'm Amanda Van Santen. I'm the OA Chief Instructor for the Dinghy Keelboat, Multi-Hull and Windsurfing schemes. And here's just a brief update of what's been going on in these schemes and what to expect for 2021. Instructor training. If you're due to revalidate this year or last year, just remember it's as normal, so it's online. And also for those around you who you might be encouraging to revalidate or haven't done any activity for the last couple of years, there are routes available for people to revalidate up to 10 years past their expiry. So if you know somebody at your club or your training centre is looking to get back into the training environment, then let us know and hopefully we can help them. Coach revalidations took place in 2020 and we are currently arranging the dates and the venues now. So we're expecting them to go ahead for 21. So if you are a coach or a trainer looking to revalidate, the dates will be coming to you soon with the venues as well. Please continue to be aware of the temporary adjustments that have had to be made to instructor training within the small boat scheme. All the details are up on the COVID hub of the training support site. You need to make sure you follow local restrictions. So, for example, at the moment, all instructor training within dinghy and windsurfing has ceased. And as we start to see things ease, we will revert back to the adjustments we made to enable dinghy instructor training, SI and windsurfing training to take place. All endorsements, however, continue to be postponed, and we will let you know if and when that changes. That's generally due to social distancing. So advanced sailing endorsement, multi-hull and keelboat continue to be postponed due to social distancing. If, however, you live in an area where a local restriction allows training to happen and there is no social distancing, or perhaps you're overseas and you're in a country where this isn't enabled, then please get in contact with us and we might be able to approve the running of a normal instructor training course. You contact Molly or myself and hopefully we can help you, but please refer to the OA Training Hub for more information. As many of you are unfortunately aware, there was a keelboat fatality in 2019, an unfortunate and terrible incident at a sailability centre. We've sent out quite a bit of communication, just telling people about this incident and how it happened throughout last year to make people aware about the boat and the issue that the sailor had. And the safety bulletin was disseminated to all our clubs, training centres and sailability centres last year, and it's available on the MIB website. The full report is also available on the MIB website, if you'd like to see that. During the conferences last year, we gave people a little bit of information about the incident, what happened and why, and some workshops were delivered at the Sailability Conference and will again this year at the virtual conference. We also did the same at the training conference in February in 2020. So hopefully most people are now aware of the incident and how it happened. Due to this, OA Training reviewed or are reviewing our inspection processes and the supporting documents to try and minimise the likelihood of such a fatality happening again. Our work continues and will continue throughout 2021. So please look out for updates on the training inspections. Most importantly, the paperwork that goes with it, so the administration side of things, and also the expectations of what we're looking for. We've reviewed the inspection process itself, including the form, as well as the RGN, so the supporting guidance and documentation. As soon as this is available, we'll let you know so you can familiarise yourself with this information. And inspector training will also take place, so our inspectors are fully aware and familiar with the changes that we've had to make. Self-help guidance will be made available on assessing risk and creating and reviewing safety management systems that are robust and effective. And also we're looking into a range of support that can be made available to our sailability centres. As soon as this information is available, we'll make you aware, but also it will be spoken about at the Sailability Conference as well for those involved. It's really important to learn from incidents and accidents and to encourage that conversation to take place in our clubs and training centres. So the key messages for action from this fatality are around staff and volunteer training. Remember to document everything. Make yourself familiar with centre boats. That's not just the ones you use every day. That's the ones that are at the training centre that are used by your participants and your students. Train your staff and volunteers on key characteristics, the rigging of them, and any safety mechanism that those boats might have. We want you to encourage safety boat training, and if need be, run some safety boat courses to ensure that everybody is happy with their role within the training centre and club. Seek regular opportunities to then reflect on that training, develop on it, and refresh those skills. Don't forget, some of us only jump in a safety boat maybe once or twice a year for our rotated time. In between that, it's fundamental that we give people opportunity to refresh their skills, especially if new boats are coming into your club or your training centre. The safety boat people are fundamental to the safety of the sport taking place. So let's help them and refresh the skills. But remember, as an instructor, you are also taking on your safety boat duties when you're teaching a group. So make sure you're familiar with the centre's boats and how to rescue them in the case of a capsize or perhaps inversion. And remember to document and evidence everything, just in case somebody wants to take a look or you want to refer back to it at a later stage. Take the time now to review and consider the robustness of your safety management systems and look out for our revised guidance documents, guides to writing ops procedures, as well as creating risk assessments. Here's a short video for you. The world of foiling. Certainly an exciting concept that's taking over all kinds of areas of sailing, windsurfing, and also now powerboating. Just look at America's Cup alone. The technology it brings and the excitement it brings to our screens is just unbelievable. And globally, the UK now sits as the second highest in foiling participation, with France just ahead of us. The OA during the foiling movement back in 2018, when we integrated foiling courses into our sailing and windsurfing schemes to enable our training centres to bring foiling to their students. Technology developments keep aiding accessibility and new equipment's coming out all the time. New concepts are appearing for both sail and power. So how do we keep up with this as a governing body? At the moment, we're investigating an umbrella model that will enable foiling and different concepts to be brought into the RYA. But to do this, we need to consider how we can work a little bit differently. We can't run them in the same way that we run our core disciplines of sailing and windsurfing and the schemes that we provide our training centres. We need to work a little bit smarter because it's not the same people that are looking to do these sports. Also, what's fundamental, and one of the main reasons we brought foiling in before in 2018, was the safety management and the operational advice that the RWA can provide their training centres to ensure that these new concepts are taught safely in an environment that can keep our students safe and taught well. So, in 2021, watch out for both wing foiling and e-foiling. These are the two areas we're going to trial throughout this year, so watch this space. RWA events in 2021 are probably going to look a bit different. We're having to go into that virtual world. So this year, the virtual events that you can take part in are the RWA Dinghy Show, the Sailability Conference, the Cruising Conference, and the Regional Instructor Training Days. So please do join us because now they're more accessible than ever. Remember to keep up to date in other areas as well. Check out RWA Training's social content on our Facebook pages. Watch out for the new RWA website coming soon. Share your thoughts in the various surveys that RWA Training are putting out, including the provision of instructor training and our guided hours survey. And most importantly, keep up to date with the latest COVID-19 updates. See how the restrictions are affecting our training, the adaptations and the allowances that we're making, the current guidance for running our RWA activity, and how these might be affecting our inspections. Check out the RWA Training support site for the latest information. Thank you very much for listening, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Keep safe.